Welcome to the Bite Pod, where we explore the real-world challenges and innovations shaping global trade, compliance, and risk management. I'm your host, Anne Riitho. The world of trade is moving fast. New tariffs, new rules, new risks. Whether it be imports or exports, you have to stay on your toes. Today's guest has spent over 20 years in the trenches of trade compliance. From classifying tens of thousands of SKUs to leading global programs that shape how companies move products across borders. Tosca Derrick is the Director of Global Trade Compliance at Bunzl Distribution and the President of the Organization of Women in International Trade in North Texas. We're talking about how the role of trade professionals has evolved from being walking encyclopedias of tariff codes to becoming strategic partners who help companies navigate global change. Welcome, Tosca. I'm so happy to have you here with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So just getting started, Tosca, we like to start with like a little bit of background and career journey because everyone in global trade comes at this from such wildly different angles. So you worked your way up from entry writer at UPS to the Director of Global Trade Compliance. Can you walk me through your career and kind of what got you here and any advice you have for others who are getting started?
Yeah, it's wild to look back how I first started. I started in trade compliance when I was 19 years old, sitting in a cubicle classifying products for UPS. Classification is the cornerstone of trade. We've all heard that. It decides our duty rates. It helps with PGA admissibility, among other things. We've all heard if you get classification wrong, you're kind of going to get it all wrong from there. I still laugh when I think back when we would debate over 2% of duty difference. It felt like life or death at that time. But that's when I knew I loved this work. I memorized classifications like it was a superpower. I could look at a product and instantly know where it belonged in the tariff schedule, or at least the first 6 digits. I still quiz myself today walking through the store. That foundation taught me precision, patience, and problem solving. And that's how today I still work. Later in my career, I started working on tariff engineering projects, and that was a lot of fun. It was fun to classify and creatively bring classification to try to figure out how we could save money or change our products in a way that really worked for the business. I spent hours breaking down products like festive wreaths, decorations, figuring out how small adjustments could change and reduce the duty rate. It sounds so nerdy, but classification has always been the favorite part of my job. It's also fun to explain things to other people outside of trade, like why is there a small piece of fabric on a pair of high-heel shoes? Or why does some grapevine wreaths have more twigs sticking out than others? Or even why is there a little pocket that holds nothing on women's clothing? Because having a pocket below the waist could lower a duty rate on some garments. I always laugh thinking about how tariff and trade changes or even influences things that we wouldn't know, like decorating habits. When the Section 301 tariffs hit, grapevine wreaths suddenly carried a higher duty rate than floral ones. So guess what? We shifted. Instead of a natural look, we sold that everybody needed a more floral look. The more flowers, the better. Who would have thought that a duty rate could change how you're decorating your house?
That's crazy. I think those are great examples to bring up because how many times have we tried on a pair of pants and been like, why is this pocket here? It's not doing anything.
Exactly.
Like that's wild. Can you think, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but like what's the craziest like classification argument or like classification decision you've had to justify?
Yeah, I think festive was really fun. I worked at Michael's arts and crafts store, and we would always argue over festive classifications during that time of the year. I think it was a lot of fun because you could have a wreath, it could have all these flowers, all these grapevine, and then we could put a skull on it, and all of a sudden it's festive and it's 0%. And so we would, we had a lot of fun with that. But if the skull was sparkly and maybe not spooky, then was it really festive? So that was always a lot of fun to go through that.
Yeah, wow, that's wild.
Yeah, and then when I mastered classification, I wanted to really understand every side of trade that I could. I intentionally sought out different experiences. I worked for a broker, an importer, a manufacturer. I even did some consulting work for a trade attorney. I spent a lot of time also with a software company and managed customer accounts on the brokerage side. I wanted to understand every single aspect from the customer side to the technical side. And each role that I had gave me a different perspective on how trade works in practice, from the operational details to the business strategy behind them. And now, after 21 years in the field, I feel like I've worked on nearly every side of trade, from classification, FTZs, drawback, valuation, exports, and now the recent tariff shifts that continue to reshape global trade supply chains. When I stepped into my current role as Director of Global Trade Compliance, I brought that full spectrum of experience with me and helps me oversee multiple operating companies effectively because I understand the challenges that each one is facing from multiple angles. My best advice for anybody starting out is really simple. Master the fundamentals, learn the rules, understand the purpose, take the time to get it right. Once you understand how you read and apply the regulations, you can start connecting the dots between policy, operations, and business strategy. That's how I grew from the very beginning now into a leadership role.
Wow, that's so interesting. And it does sound like you've had so many great experiences across trade. Again, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, but it sounds like you should be like a go-to person for everything. I know we'll get into kind of tools and resources later, but I know you're active on LinkedIn. Can people reach out to you if they have questions, or are you too busy with your job?
No, absolutely. During all of this, I really felt like community is so important. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit of how important community is. I live and breathe that. That is truly important to me. And I always make the joke that once I meet you, you're stuck with me. And I truly believe that. We need to lean on each other right now. So please call me. Please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you too. It's a two-way street. I learn from others just as much as I try to pour into them. So absolutely, I'm available anytime.
Yeah, and in saying that, you referenced the right now of it all. So, how has trade and the trade turmoil this year changed the role of trade compliance professionals?
Right? A lot, right? The trade has changed dramatically over the past 2 decades. When I first started 21 years ago, the focus was almost entirely on getting the classification right. The HTS code was the center of everything. Then we moved into the era of CTPAT and supply chain security. We were worried about container inspections, making sure our warehouses were secure. We worked hard to gain treacherous trader status through ISA. From there, the focus expanded again into forced labor, UFLPA, where the priority became knowing our supply chains deeply, tracing materials back to their source, and working hard to ensure we monitor the suppliers and their suppliers and their suppliers. And sometimes all the way back to the raw material could mean where the cotton was actually grown for textiles.
Yeah.
Now we're entering a new phase of trade, one that's heavily driven on country of origin and manufacturing strategies. The work today requires not just technical expertise, but agility, business acumen, and strategic alignment. Trade evolves constantly, and we've had to evolve with it, taking on new areas of responsibility and integrating more closely with operations, sourcing, and finance more than ever before. For many years, the value of a trade professional was in memorization. If you were like me, you could quote trade regulations off the top of your head, and you could classify products by memory. It was our party trick. But now that's not what defines us anymore. Everyone has access to the same headlines, and now everyone is an expert. The difference now lies in context, understanding how trade policy impacts the business, applying strategy to reduce costs, and using that knowledge to anticipate what's coming next, or try to the best we can. When tariffs shift overnight or when new regulations take effect, trade professionals are the ones who explain the downstream impacts, model the financial exposure, and build a path forward. That's where our role has really transformed. From being the people who check the box to being the ones who are guiding the business through uncertainty. We're not just here to argue over 2% classifications anymore. We are strategic partners, problem solvers, and risk managers. The work we do protects margin, enables growth, and keeps supply chains moving. To everyone in this field, you are valuable, you are needed, you are not a roadblock, you are the roadmap.
That is such a great message. And that's just such a powerful way to put it. What would you say has been the hardest part for companies adjusting to this shift that you've just described? Is it recognizing that they have this roadmap on their team? Is it the data? Is it the suppliers? Is it mindset? Kind of as trade continues to evolve, like what do you see as the hardest part for companies?
I think the hardest part for companies is maybe realizing that they didn't have this expertise in-house. And I think for companies like that found themselves in a situation where they were the ones who didn't have an expert. They were doing the best they could to understand the trade regulations as they were coming. The hardest part about all of this is if you're not in the weeds every day, you don't realize that some of these headlines maybe aren't accurate. Or maybe we have to wait on the executive order to actually publish and then the Federal Register to publish so that we can read the details, understand the details, and be able to apply that to business. That disconnect has been a really large disconnect, I feel like. But some companies who, understood our value early on and went all in and had trade compliance professionals on staff and experts there readily available to them, I feel like they were a lot easier and ready to adjust. And other companies are heavily relying on brokers or consultants, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely okay. But having that expertise in-house that understands your business, that understands what you're going through, that can work immediately with your senior leadership, explain that, those companies have really been able to, I feel like, change a bit easier.
Mm-hmm. And just in terms of like the value, your leadership, you're a director. How do you help your team feel that value every day? I mean, you are such, a wonderful person. I'm sure you're great at it. But as you said, it's not just about classification anymore. Your team is now, the roadmap. How do you kind of impress that importance on your team?
Oh yeah, that's so important. As a leader, it's my job to support them. I really do feel like leadership is being a servant and helping our team succeed. And throughout my leadership, I've made it a point to tell everyone that take a breath. It's okay. We're gonna get through it. It's stressful right now. We even kind of did some breathing exercises when things got really stressful. Those things are important, just to really take care of the team and the ones that are, really in the trenches doing all the hard work. I also reminded them that right now, memorization is not your superpower. Do not try to memorize all of this, because the moment we have memorized it, then there's a new shift in trade. I think before we were our podcast, we were talking, you said there has been 20, maybe 25 changes to the HTS, and it's only October.
Yeah.
We can't memorize all of that. Our value that we bring is honesty and truth. So I've always impressed upon them, we are to alert the businesses once we have an executive order or once we have a Federal Register notice, then we can guide the business. Our value is not bringing another headline. Our leadership team has tons of headlines already. Our value is knowing that when we give them information, that is information they can rely on and they can make business decisions on. If that takes us just a little bit, an hour or two more to make sure that we get it right, that's really important right now.
Yeah, and speaking of getting it right, obviously I'm talking to you on the Byte Pod, and Byte is a software platform that we're trying to help people get it right. But we're not going to talk about Byte today, but from your perspective, what kinds of tools have been helpful to you? What have you seen really move the needle in your work, if any? Tools, resources, what's been helping you get through all this?
I love tools. Give me a good dashboard and I'm in nerd heaven. I've seen some incredible Power BI dashboards and that pull together ERP data, landed cost, HTS codes, country of origin. What's really exciting is how these tools have evolved. It's not just about tracking compliance anymore or using it just for auditing. The really powerful tools are helping companies make smarter sourcing and pricing decisions. For example, some teams are now building models where you can plug in hypothetical duty rates that instantly see the financial impact. Or instead of a look back, some teams are building models that you can even add in the margins that you need, the tariffs, and this tool will help you predict what your pricing should look like. That kind of visibility used to take us days and days to analyze. And now it could really be at your fingertips. The key is to having the right people who can connect compliance data to strategic business goals. That's where the real value comes in. And honestly, tools like that are becoming a differentiator. Even in broker bids, technology is one of the deciding factors. Companies with strong, transparent tools are the ones that stand out. Not every company has a large compliance team, like we just talked about a little while ago. And some companies really do need to lean heavily on these types of tools to help them manage these changes. And that can really be a change for them in these times.
Yeah, and you mentioned pulling together the ERP data. One kind of common theme that's come up on all of this is having that data ready. So your tools are only going to be as good as the data that you have available to feed into them, right? So if you're a data nerd and you love your dashboards and you love, all things data, like I think you and I, then that's great. But I think that's one just powerful reminder is the tools are only as good as the data going into them.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've all heard it. Trash in, trash out.
For sure. Switching topics a little bit. You are also the founding president of the Organization of Women in International Trade North Texas. So that organization focuses on educating and empowering women in international trade. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, how you think that organization can fit into these topics of moving trade professionals toward being the strategic partner in the roadmap and how you're working to empower women in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still getting OWIT North Texas off the ground. It has been a slower start than I expected. My best friend and I, Megan Zabrowski, we co-founded it to create a space for women in trade to connect, learn, and grow because there was a real gap in our area. This year has been busier and more unpredictable than I ever could have imagined, which makes communities like this even more important. The pace of change in trade is constant, and people in this field are under a lot of pressure. None of us can do this work alone. And that's why building a network centered around women's growth and collaboration matters so much right now. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about how powerful a strong network really is. I've achieved a lot through hard work and persistence, but I've also learned that having the right people around you makes all the difference. The ideas, the perspective, the encouragement, they push you to keep evolving. I had lunch yesterday with someone I've admired for years. She shared stories and lessons. She reminded me that I am also still growing too. It's one of those conversations that fills your tank and reminds you of why community matters. And that's why I really started OWIT North Texas, and that's what I wanted it to be. A place where women can learn from each other, where they can share what they've gained, and we can build a network that keeps lifting the next generation higher. We also want to encourage more women to consider careers in this field. The last survey I saw, it said there were about 15,000 licensed customs brokers in the United States. That is compared to more than over 200,000 importers. There are just not enough of us to go around. So one of our long-term goals is to offer a scholarship for a licensed customs broker prep course to help women who want to take the exam and get the training they need. But we're still in the early stages. I have big dreams. So far, we've assembled a board. We've held our first meeting. We have a lot more planning and events coming soon. I've always been taught to leave places better than I found them. I think that started as something we were told as kids, clean up after yourself. But over time, I've come to see it as something deeper. When I think about how I leave this industry better than I found it, creating this network feels like the right way to start. My hope is that it becomes a space where people can connect, grow, and make a path a little easier for the next person to come.
That's amazing. That is such a wonderful mission, both personally and for the organization. In your interactions with women so far, do you see that the next generation of women in trade is approaching the profession differently? Are they adapting to this strategic partner role?
Yeah, they are. The next generation of women in trade is approaching the profession with a different kind of confidence. They're not afraid to ask questions, to challenge old processes, or to speak up when something doesn't make sense. And that is such a powerful shift. When I first started, there was an unspoken pressure to know everything. You had to prove yourself before you even had a chance to learn. But the newer generation sees collaboration as a strength, not a weakness. They share information, support each other, they lean on tools and data to help decision making. And as a leader, I tell my team all the time that things are changing too fast for memorization to be the goal. What matters now is knowing how to read, interpret, and analyze executive orders and regulations quickly. The real shift in our work is we're researching more, we're adapting faster, we're making decisions in real time. They're also growing up in a world where technology is second nature. I can remember a time before computers, but they can't. And that's a good thing. They're comfortable using AI, they're comfortable with dashboards, analytics. They're using tools to answer questions faster and to make smarter business decisions. And I think trade as a whole has become more visible. We're seeing it in headlines, news cycles. There's even legal actions tied to trade. That's becoming common talking points. Years ago, people had no idea what trades were or what my job actually meant. Now everyone seems to know at least a little. It's made what we do feel more relevant, and it's elevating the importance of our profession in ways that haven't happened before. What's really encouraging is that companies are starting to see trade differently too. It used to be viewed as a back office function, a team that made sure things were filed correctly. Now trade is being recognized as a strategic business partner that helps grow, reduce risk, and add value. And that's what excites me the most, seeing this new generation blend knowledge, technology, and collaboration to shape the future of trade. So I think the profession is in good hands.
That's amazing. You mentioned AI a little bit. Just kind of going again off script, what's one way you've seen AI adapted, or have you seen people using AI that you would encourage others to use as well?
Yeah, I use AI every day. I'm one of those who love the tool. Of course, you see people helping AI write you emails or helping with those things, but I think we can take it a step further. I think, if you talk to your AI often and you train it to really learn from you in the way that I believe we were supposed to use AI, then you can use it to look at some court orders or these executive orders that are taking hours and hours and hours for us to analyze. I've been able to give my AI an executive order and say, just on this executive order, if you were a trade professional that had this type of product, what out of this executive order would be important to you?
Mm-hmm.
And while, sure, we can't lean on it for everything, we still need our brains and we still need us to look at it. I don't think AI is going to take over our roles. I don't think it's going to take over my job. But I do think it can make my job a little easier. And I think there's no shame in that to say, hey, help me with this executive order. And then obviously I go through, I read it, I make sure that I trust that information before I'm giving it to my business partners. But I still think that can take off hours and hours and hours of work that maybe before we didn't have.
Yeah, it kind of gets you to the answer faster. I've also found it's helpful kind of to like prove wrong, right? Like if you read it and you read your executive order and you're like, wait a second, like I interpreted this differently. You can go back and forth a little bit and say, like kind of challenge yourself to prove the AI wrong and get that other perspective and how someone else may have interpreted something, or question your own thinking a little bit and kind of get you thinking critically about, what's coming out of the AI.
I love that. Use it as a team member.
Yeah.
Sometimes people in trade, they may not have a team. They may be the only ones there in their organization that is an expert in trade. So absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, put it in, argue with it, and just, bounce ideas off of it. I know a lot of us can go in loops, thinking about this and what do these words actually mean? And we kind of find ourselves looping. So I love your idea of just put it in there, debate with it, argue with it, and ultimately it makes us better at our jobs.
Exactly, yeah. And how do you think the profession can keep evolving? So, trade compliance, you've said a few times, it used to be checking boxes or, the people who say no. But how can trade compliance professionals be the ones who help companies navigate the change?
Gosh, I have so many stories from the days when I was that person who had to say no more times than not. I remember an idea to make cute Band-Aids for stocking stuffers. And of course, I had to be the one in the room that said, actually, those are a medical device. Then there were peacock feathers. Oh my goodness. Those are CITES protected. And for a while, they were on everything. And that part is what makes this field so much fun, is how it allows us to flow and consider how this really affects us outside of work. Someone once asked me, why is ribbon so expensive? And I said, do you really want to know? Because ribbon has anti-dumping duties. Those can make tariff rates very, very high. I think that person probably got a lot more information than they bargained for, but it's fun to see people realize that how trade touches the smallest things. Think about rubber band balls, plastic paper clips, even simple desk things that you have every day that you use has its own trade stories. Rubber bands have anti-dumping too, but make them into a ball and all of a sudden it's classified as a toy. Or coat a paper clip with plastic and there's no more anti-dumping. It never ends. This is exactly why our jobs never get boring. In that role, my team viewed every single item before it could be cut into a PO. And sometimes it felt like we were the ones that slowed things down. We asked for more information than they ever thought we would need, or we would have to classify something to a higher duty rate than maybe the team expected. It made us feel like, as trade, we were the problem, even when we were just doing our jobs. And I think that's what's changing now. The profession is evolving. It's now a mindset. We're moving away from being a checkpoint and becoming part of the strategy. To do that, we have to stay connected to the business. We have to understand our products, our sourcing, the financial impact. When compliance is brought in early, we can help design solutions that work globally and sustainably instead of fixing the problems after the fact. And technology is a huge part of that shift too. Tools like we were talking about, AI, data analytics, real-time dashboards that give us visibility we've never had before. We can start to see patterns, predict changes, and give the business answers in real time. It turns compliance into a proactive partner instead of a reactionary function. So to me, this evolution is very exciting. We're no longer the people who say no. We're the ones that help companies move forward, responsibly, of course. And if you ever had to find yourself explaining to friends why ribbon costs more or why grapevine wreaths suddenly disappeared and all of a sudden you now want the latest flower, it just makes sure you're doing your job right. It makes trade make sense.
It's funny you use the ribbon example. I was recently at a luncheon with a large group of women in Boston, and it was amazing. And one woman had just published a new book, and in the book, she was distributing it in a cotton bag with a ribbon tied around it. And so she was saying, what do you do? And I was saying, what do you do? And she was like, oh my gosh, you have no idea. I had no idea. I thought, she's a startup, and she was saying, like, I ordered this book and I thought, wouldn't this be a cute cotton bag and ribbon? And then I didn't realize that, the cotton bag could have forced labor and the ribbon had extra charges. And she was like, it never occurred to me how much would go into like this cute idea I had of putting the book in a bag. And it just goes to show, even if you're a small startup who's, just selling, let's say 1,000 units of this book, all of a sudden, like, her woes of getting that imported were, some beyond what she could even possibly begin to imagine. So it's funny that you brought up the ribbon, because that's one that people don't think of. It's just, you never know what could change or what you need to be paying attention to when you're importing. So great example. I think we've covered a lot. And I think one last question is just, what's one piece of advice you would give trade professionals who are looking to improve their trade compliance as we close out 2025 and get ready for what I'm sure is another year of change in 2026?
I'd say keep investing in yourself, keep learning, stay curious, take the time to really understand what's changing, read the executive orders, follow global updates, and learn from each other. I know this season can feel really stressful, and it's also transforming our roles. Trade compliance isn't sitting in the back office anymore. We are getting invited to speak to the decision makers now. We are the ones who are helping shape strategy and guide decisions. We're not just explaining the rules, we're helping create how to make it work for business, how to stay competitive, and how to do it responsibly. That shift is teaching all of us new skills, agility, adaptability, and the ability to think beyond the traditional box that we used to all work in. It's really exciting to see our profession evolve like this, and it's a reminder that growth often happens in the middle of change. So I would say take a deep breath, give yourself some credit. You're a part of something important. You are strong, you are capable, and you are helping build the future of global trade. It is not easy, but that's what makes it meaningful.
I feel like we may need to release that clip out just to let people play that on repeat throughout the day as these changes come through, just to hear you saying, give yourself credit, you're a part of something important, remind people what they're doing, because it is so easy to get lost in the weeds. And I just love that about your perspective and redefining exactly what expertise is. It's not about memorizing the rules, but understanding the why behind them. You've reminded us over and over that the more complex trade becomes, the more valuable the context and the people who deliver it really are and really can be. So thank you so much, Tosca, for being on with us today, for sharing your insights on trade compliance and the resources and networks that are available to the trade community. So even if you're not in North Texas, look out there. There are other trade networks available to you. There are people in this community who want to share and learn from one another. So I know, Tosca, you're active on LinkedIn, as am I. But if also you're a business looking to improve your compliance processes, today's conversations offered some great takeaways. Get the fundamentals right, leverage the right tools, do your best to stay, I'm not even going to say ahead, but stay on top of regulatory changes. And as always, you can find more resources, tools, and updates at bitedata.io. And don't forget to subscribe to the Byte Pod for additional conversations that we have. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Tosca.
Thank you.